Hey friends, thanks for joining me today. My name's Dan Nelson and I'm an artist. Most of my artwork these days is spent doing oil paintings that sell in art galleries and so forth. So the world of fine arts. But every once in a while I get a phone call that asks me to tap into my old life. The life of an illustrator. I spent much of my adult life in the illustration world. Couple differences between the fine arts world and the illustration world. In the illustration world, you nearly always, you're doing what the telephone told you to do. If you see what I mean by that. An ad agency or a publication or something, some company calls you up and they say, we want a drawing of this, that, or the other. And you say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And usually they want it tomorrow, if not later today. Deadlines are just an absolute intrinsic part of illustration work. That's the bad news. So you spend a lot of sleepless nights, long days getting the illustrations done. The good news is you nearly always get paid, unlike in the fine arts world where sometimes you can slave over a painting for hours, days, weeks, months and never get paid for it. So there's one difference. The other difference is being a little bit more esoteric or specific. I'm not sure which word is the best one there. Is in the world of illustration, the focus is nearly always primarily on the picture. What is it a picture of? What is it that you're being called upon to? Hello, Toby. Welcome, guys. Good to see you here. In the illustration world, the emphasis is not, as my fine arts painting is, the emphasis in fine art, my emphasis is on brush strokes and texture and color and composition and so forth. But in the world of illustration, the emphasis is nearly always on, we need a picture. In this case, we need a picture of this subdivision that we are going to build not too many miles from here. We need a picture. This will no doubt be part of their sales arsenal when people come in and say, well, we're thinking about buying a house here, having a house built for us. What is it going to look like? And so they'll show them my drawing and say, well, this is what it's going to look like. And then, of course, they'll say, well, not exactly, of course. So this is just an artist's rendering. And most people are supposed to nod and say, oh, I get it. Okay, so it's something like this. This is what you had an artist do for you. That's right. So that's what an illustration is. An illustration is, we need a picture of a pair of blue jeans. We need a picture of an elephant. We need a picture of a donkey riding an elephant, and whatever it may be. And in the world of fine arts, even though many of us are still painting pictures, for at least for people in my world, the focus is on the abstract elements of the artwork. Line, shape, color, design, texture, and so forth. Especially in my case, in my belief, the marks themselves, the very, very, very marks themselves. Okay, so today I'm doing illustration. And as you can see, I titled this broadcast Craftsmanship and Illustration. Let me back up a little bit. So this past week, in fact, I'm deeply disappointed. My wife and I were in Washington, D.C. for a conference Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week. And Saturday afternoon, we spent some time at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Both buildings. First of all, and we didn't have a lot of time. Of course, your feet can only handle so much, you know, because you get sore, so tired so quickly. But your brain can only absorb as much as your feet can stand or something like that. Anyway, we were in the traditional building for a while. That's the West Building of the National Gallery of Art, with all the mostly old, mostly European masterpieces from centuries gone by. So we saw some great Rembrandts, and of course a whole bunch of other things. So then we walked from there to the East Building, and yes, at least I knew what we were getting ourselves in for, because of course the East Building is the, for want of a better term, modern art side of the National Gallery of Art. And so once again we had our minds, hearts, heads filled with questions mostly. And the purveyors of modern art would not object to that classification. Many of them say, good, that's what we wanted you to have. We wanted you to have questions. Unlike most of their patrons, however, I am actually intentionally, actively in the process of writing a book on the subject of modern art. So not only do I have questions, I'm foolish enough to believe that I actually also have some answers. Hey, let me zoom you in here so you can see a little bit better what it is what I'm painting here. I'm going to be here for a while. In fact, the detail, the monotony of what I am painting, even as we speak, is part of what I want to talk about when I talk about modern art and what my wife and I, again, reacquainted ourselves with. Now, of course, she doesn't have a degree in art, of course, so pretty much all this stuff hanging on all the walls was new to her. I was could have been arrogant and said, yeah, I recognize Paul Klee. I mean, before I saw the name, I said, that's a Modigliani. That's a Cezanne, and so on and so on and so forth. But the point was not for me to show off to my wife. My wife, who does not have a degree in art, is like most people walking into a modern art museum or gallery. And I feel like I have gained at least a little bit more insight into the mysteries of, again, what I'm just calling, for want of a better term, modern art. Modern art is a catch-all phrase. You academics and scholastics, shut up. I am not talking to you. Because if I were, I use my terminology much more carefully. I'd have to make a great distinction between all the isms, and you would say, the academics would say, no, modern art was technically finished in 1927 or something like that. And okay, but I'm not talking to you, so I'm just calling what most people call modern art. Okay, here's my insight, and you may ask me, where did I get my insight from? That's a good question without an easy answer. I got it from a lifetime of not only thinking about art and modern art, and a degree in fine arts from a typical university art department. I'll just leave it at that. Which, of course, prompted a lifetime of not only thinking, but actually, if I may call it thus, it's what the section rendition looks like. Good, I will. Beacon, good to have you on board again. I'll show you. In fact, let me back up for just a second. Here's what it looks like so far. And again, the part that I'm working on right now, I'm painting little bitty bushes. Anyway, so where you may ask, where do I get my thoughts from? The answer is from a lifetime of thinking. I'm going to amplify that. A lifetime of troubled thinking, frankly. A lifetime of not just merrily musing on the subject, but a lifetime of reading, investigating. Of course, in recent years, since the invention of the internet, listening and watching many YouTube videos and listening to many podcasts. Before the internet, it was reading books on all sides of the modern art questions and issues. So I've been pretty aggressively trying to find answers. That's why I'm in the process, have been for the last 3 or 4 years, of writing a book. I've got 2 books going on, so that you don't be confused. I speak often of my one book is called The Breakable Laws of Painting. That's not the book I'm talking about right now. Right now I'm talking about a book that doesn't have a title yet, but it's about modern art. And so it's a lifetime of thinking, and not only thinking, but studying and troubled thinking, if I may put it that way. So not just merrily musing in an academic sense, but I would say really stirred up to discover what are some of the answers. And I feel like in just the last couple of weeks, and this was amplified by my visit to the National Gallery of Art East building, the Modern Art building, this hunch. I want to say, and at the risk of offending some of you, but there you go. If you pay attention in your deep person, your deep soul, I don't know what to call it. I'll put it this way. The cosmos, I'm being really weird now, granted, but most of the time I'm not weird, so bear with me. The cosmos will whisper secrets to your soul. I could also say God will whisper secrets to your soul. Some of you will be offended and put off by that kind of terminology. So if you're put off by that, then simply hear me when I say, weirdly, the cosmos will whisper things to your soul. Okay, so that gives you some, besides academic research and talking and listening to many people and musing deeply on the subject for many years, you pay attention and your inner child will pick up things that your grumpy adult mind won't necessarily catch. So here's one of the most recent insights, and it's not, I don't think it's anything too thunderous or unusual. In fact, I've already written about it in my book, and it's just taken on a whole new level of significance to me. Here it is. I think that the intersection or the overlap or lack of overlap of art, any kind of art, modern art, contemporary art, old-fashioned art, traditional art, and craftsmanship. I think craftsmanship may be one of the dividing, defining and dividing issues in the world of art. There is much, for better or worse, and I keep wishing it didn't, but there's much that troubles me in the modern art world. And this, despite the fact that my art history professors, 40 some years ago now, did their best to infuse into me the same, forgive me for my language, but you'll understand, the same orgasmic delight in modern art, in Jackson Pollock, in Andrew, who I'm thinking about, Andy Warhol, in the Paul Klays and the Kandinskys, despite the fact that the professors standing before me, as I said, had nearly orgasmic delight in all of this modern art, it left me with deep, deep, deep questions. And any of you who know the kind of professor I'm talking about, the typical art history professor, then you will recognize that my adjective there is hilariously appropriate. The professors that stand up and talk about art history, again, I'll just say it one more time, are nearly orgasmic in their expressions of ecstasy over all this stuff. And I tried to drink the Kool-Aid. I tried to swallow what they were feeding me as a good, humble, young college student with a lot of skill, by the way. I tried to believe and receive and understand and believe that they were telling me the truth. I tried really hard. But now that I'm 40 plus years out of that culture, I don't believe what they told me. I believe they drank the Kool-Aid, and I believe they believed what they were saying. But I think they were, for the most part, sadly misguided. And the issue of craftsmanship has recently, in my thinking, come back to the forefront. Now, let me jump in here really quickly, because some of you modern art lovers may be on the verge of becoming, well, you've already turned me off probably, but those of you who know them, tell them, well, after you left, this is what he said. I am not, quote unquote, against. I don't like being against anything, but I am definitely not against modern art per se. I'm against, I feel very uncomfortable. I'm not against. I feel like two kinds of art are very subpar, inferior, inadequate, damaging to the human soul, and by the way, let me say real quickly, that's why so many of the modern artists die so young at their own hands. Drink and drugs and suicide and so forth. So many of them. Because I think art bereft of craftsmanship damages the soul of the viewer and the maker especially. But not all modern art is bereft of craftsmanship. Okay, so as Nancy, my wife, and I were walking through the halls, the hallowed halls of the National Gallery of Art, Modern Art Building. One of the things I kept pointing out to her, because I was thinking out loud with her along these lines as we were walking through, I said, now, it's not a black and white issue. It's not like modern art is bad and old art is good. In fact, quite the contrary. In the old building, let me insert real quickly, in the West building where there was all old art, old classical painting and sculpture and so on, just because a painting is old or was done in the Netherlands in the 1600s does not mean it's a good painting. And I could take you straight to that building this moment and show you some that I think fit that description. So just because a painting artwork is old doesn't mean it's good, and just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad. So as we were walking through the modern art section, I said it's a very mixed bag, because some modern art, in my humble opinion, is actually quite good, and some of it is not. And I get two dividing lines. I've given you one, craftsmanship. I want to come back to craftsmanship in a minute, but here, let me give you the other dividing line between, I think, art that is good for the soul, if I can use that kind of old-fashioned, almost religious-sounding language. Art that is good for the soul and art that is not good for the soul. Two things. One, craftsmanship, and the other is, what is the art? And many modern artists would say art is communication. And I think as soon as an artist believes that art is communication, they are no longer creating good art. They are, in fact, creating communication. In other words, I take them at their face value. If you talk to many modern artists and say, what are you doing? They would say, well, I'm trying to convey the thought. I'm trying to communicate. I'm trying to get a message across. That's the most common. These artists have their message deserves to get out, says the National Endowment for the Arts. These artists, I'm trying to think of a minority group, very mixed bag, Beacon. Yep, very mixed bag. But okay, so two things. If it's communication, that is, if the artist is communicating, then I take them at face value. It's not art, it's communication. And the other thing is if it lacks craftsmanship. Okay, now let me define craftsmanship for you. Craftsmanship is the physical, not the mental. It is the physical manipulation of physical material with intelligence. That is my definition. That's going to be my new definition of what is art, or what is good art. What is art, by the way, is stuff that's made to look at, and that's why communication art is not good art, because it's not art that's made to look at. It's art that's made to convince you of a position or an opinion or some political or philosophical or sociological phenomenon. So art that is communication is not made to look at. It's made to look at in order to make you think something. And again, I don't ask anybody to agree with me. But if you want to join with me in the discussion, debate, exploration, then like me, you have to admit a fairly high degree of agnosticism. That is to say, I don't know. And I admit that I don't know, but I'm doing my best to try to uncover these mysteries of the universe, if you will. So art that lacks craftsmanship. Okay, craftsmanship, let me repeat my definition. Craftsmanship is the manipulation of the physical manipulation of physical entities with intelligence. So in other words, can an elephant create art? The answer is no. Can a monkey? And I know some of you who've taken at Berkeley, you took animal intelligence course, and you would disagree with me, and you think you have the right to disagree with me because you heard this at Berkeley. I know some of what I speak. No, I disagree with your professors. Of course I do. Not ignorantly, because I have some idea where they're coming from. But anyway, no, I don't think animals can create art. It is human intelligence, or unless there's other creatures that we know not of yet who have intelligence, they can create art. So craftsmanship is the physical manipulation, and I could condense it this way. Craftsmanship is the intelligent manipulation of physical entities, physical material, physical stuff. I guess that's it. The intelligent manipulation of physical stuff. That'd be the shortest definition I can give. Now, there are degrees of craftsmanship. And again, here's where walking through the halls of modern art, as I was doing on Saturday. By the way, I had fully intended to make a daily art adventure from the National Gallery of Art. And when I walked out, I slapped myself and said, oh man, I didn't make a video. Once I got in there, I got so swept up and taken away with, all the stuff I was looking at. I forgot all about you guys. Sorry about that. That was part of the original plan, and I just simply forgot to do so. So when you're walking through, well, let's go back to the traditional side of the National Gallery of Art. The mostly European, 16th, 17th, 18th century, mostly European, not entirely, but mostly. Let me limit myself just for a minute, because this is one of my favorite areas, is Dutch or Flemish. Phlegm. Phlegm no longer exists as a nation, but we still have Flemish artwork. Flemish, Dutch, Belgian, Northern European still lifes of the 17th and 18th century, 1600s. I don't know, there's no way, and still, so we're talking about near and around Rembrandt, but I'm talking about Klaas, K-L-A-A-S, I'm drawing a blank. I won't try to name the names, but you could just Google 17th century Dutch still lifes, and it's wonderful to see them in person. Not on a screen, not on a photograph, but to actually see the real stuff. It is literally jaw dropping. First of all, there is no question, no sane human being could ever look at that stuff and deny the exquisite craftsmanship. Right? You can picture that with me? They're still lifes with their glass and their half-butchered goose and their glass goblets and their leather and their crystals and their half-peeled orange and all this stuff. As I said to my wife, I said, these guys, and unfortunately it was mostly guys, Lord forgive us, women forgive us, These people, they were just showing off. They were, in a sense. Am I still on the screen? Barely? Okay. They were showing off, and boy, were they good at what they did. And then we go over to the modern art section. Here's what Scott Burdick. If you don't know Scott Burdick, spelled traditional, just the way it sounds, Burdick. He's a fellow North Carolina artist. He doesn't know me, but I know him and his work and his writings. And he has quite a, what's the word? Is it called a scree? What is it when you rage against something? He has quite a rage against modern art. He's a very, very, very gifted artist, Scott Burdick is. Google him, hit image, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I don't think there's a lot of value in screaming at things, so that's why my book will not be that. My book hopefully will be a balanced, level-headed discussion. At least that's what I'm trying to make it. But he has a very brilliant measuring device by which to evaluate modern art. Here it is, and I think everybody can relate to this. Whether you agree with him or not, you can relate to it. He says, here's the test. If you were to see a piece of modern art laying on the ground, would you recognize it as art, or would you dump your paint, your leftover concrete, your cigarette ashes, your refuse of any kind whatsoever? Would you dump your trash on the, let's say it's a canvas, on the canvas, because it's obvious that the last person that was there dumped their trash on the canvas? In other words, can you tell it's trash or art? And as you may or may not know, there's lots and lots and lots of stuff in the National Gallery of Art, in the modern art section. If you literally, if you saw that canvas laying on the ground, especially if it was in a construction zone, there is no way you would ever recognize it as a piece of art. You would recognize it as a piece of trash. And Scott Burdick said, kind of throws up his hands and say, there you go. What are you going to say about that? And I think he's got a point. It's not the only point, but it's a point. There is much in modern art that is so void of craftsmanship that one cannot possibly discern the difference between it and literal trash. And of course, there's, by the way, let me hasten to say, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the modern art world that is literally trash. Literally, that someone raided a dump or raided anything, raided an abandoned house and put it on display, called it art, and have won great awards and great accolades for their brilliant insight. In fact, Tracy Emin's bed is a very close example of that. That's just one that I can name off the top of my head. Tracy Emin's bed. It's not trash, but she literally got out of bed one morning and she was evidently a very slovenly housekeeper, and she picked up all the offage of her life on the bedroom and put it in a display case, and has won all kinds of international notoriety for her genius. Anyway, craftsmanship. Let me get back to craftsmanship for a minute. There's also another characteristic that is ubiquitous in the modern art world, and it is an incipient sarcasm, the attitude, the disposition of a scoffer. Yeah, Toby, I know. There's a lot of art that is intentionally thumbing one's nose at real art or traditional art. And thumbing one's nose, of course, I could substitute there with a much more graphic gesture that would be actually a little bit more accurate, and all of you would recognize what I mean by that. I'll refrain myself from turning this into an R-rated broadcast. But there is much scoffing, derision, sarcasm in the modern art world. Very, very much. In fact, I think to be a successful modern artist, you really do have to cop an attitude. That's for that reason I have for years have called much modern art is called attitude art. You have to have a certain not devil may care is not the right expression. It is devil go to hell attitude is more accurate in your artwork. Manifest in your artwork. In fact, the I guess more accurate everybody go to hell is the attitude manifest. Now here's the point I want to make, is that there is something intrinsically humbling. I know, Heather, I feel so bad. I did take a few pictures. Maybe I can post them on YouTube community. You know, if you guys who are subscribed or you get notifications when I put something on YouTube, I can send still shots. And I did take several pictures of several of the rooms in the National Gallery of Art. Yeah, I wish I had walked through the gallery and given this commentary on the spot. Okay, back to my topic. There is something intrinsically, I'm going to say, and take this, advisedly. Don't believe what I say. Take what I say and weigh it with me. I think there is something intrinsically humbling about manipulating physical realities. That is to say, I think, those of you who don't know who I am, you join me lately. Hi, this is me. I think that there is, I'll say it again, something intrinsically humbling about striving to be a craftsman. When you strive to create something beautiful, everybody that knows that has tried to do that knows much failure. Can I be honest? Everybody who's tried to create a thing of beauty knows that they have failed to create a thing of beauty to some degree. And then they've succeeded to a degree. I'm not being all sad and depressed here, but they have known a degree of failure. I know this is true because, in fact, here at my house, I have a few of my paintings that aren't for sale anymore because they're not good enough. I have paintings from 10 years ago, even 5, 6, 7 years ago, that are not going to see the inside of an art gallery because I look at it and go, "Ooh, I wasn't as good as I thought I was." Thank you, Heather. And everybody who strives for excellence in art, that is, who strives for craftsmanship, the manipulation of physical entities, of physical stuff, knows failure. And there's something intrinsically humbling, if I may even say humiliating, about that failure. And I think that is one of the key things that is absent in the, again, forgive me, I don't want to offend you with too harsh language, but there's just no really good way to say it. That is one of the humility of failure is one of the things that is missing in smart-ass artwork. Smart-ass artwork, attitude artwork, artwork that's trying to preach and teach you a thing or two. They're trying to preach you a message. By the way, and again, if you walk out of an art gallery, a modern art gallery, and if you have the feeling that you've been preached to, then yes, you have been in the presence of modern art. Because much modern art is in fact focused on teaching you a thing or two. And it's pretty ironic if you go to a college or university art department where the typical matriculant, the typical graduate of that art department is 22, 3, 4, or 5 years old. And of course, without even batting an eye, they presume to preach to the rest of us all their blistering socio-political insights. They do this because that is what their education has taught them, is the real purpose of art, is to preach sermons to the unenlightened. And if you hear some, I don't know if it's the word bitterness in me, again, forgive me for bitterness, but I believe that is a fair description of most modern art. It is preachy, propagandistic, and political. Convenient, they all start with the letter P, isn't it? Preachy, propagandistic, and political. And because most of the people who created this are in their young, early 20s, the other word I would have to add to that, it is preachy, propagandistic, political, and completely sophomoric. Some of you are going to have to Google, what does sophomoric mean? I'll leave it with you to find out. It's not a naughty word. Unlike some of my other words today. It's not a bad word. It's just a good word to know. On the other hand, it is simply the act. And by the way, I'll finish my sentence. On the other hand, simply the act of striving for excellence in the manipulation of physical material is intrinsically humbling. One could even say humiliating. Okay, so here's what I want to get to as far as this illustration goes, because yeah, I know, Toby. So my dialogue isn't for everybody, I know. This is the way I talk. And some people are turned off by big words because they think that big words are hiding something. Other people like words and believe that good words are a good way to communicate. So people pretty much self-select, and the people who hate my broadcast have already selected themselves out. Let me talk about craftsmanship and even what you've seen me doing, what you've been watching me do for the last, how long have you been on here? Half an hour? Some of you might get the impression, hang in there with me just for a second, that what I'm doing right now is quite monotonous. Here's what I want to say. You know what? I want you to see my face. You are exactly right. This, my friend, is monotonous. Tedious, some other words. This is tedious. This is boring. Monotonous. I think those are the best three words, are they not? You are right. Here's a point I want to make. Tediousness, I'll use that word. Tediousness is an inextricable component of craftsmanship. I've never said that sentence before in my life, so let me say it again. I wish there was tedium is the word. Tediousness. Tedium is an inextricable component of craftsmanship. The person who will not submit themselves to tedium will never be a craftsman. Woo! Sometimes, just sometimes, when you're a teacher, like I'm being a teacher right now, I confess it. I'm teaching. Sometimes the teacher says things that even surprises him or herself. I just had one of the, would you be able to show some of your paintings you don't like? Let's see. Oh, great idea, Heather. Great idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. I hope I won't remember. I hope I'll remember to do that. If you want to put that comment later in the comment section when I'm not doing this broadcast, I think that's a great idea. Heather suggested, I'm sorry for the rest of you, Heather suggested that I post some paintings that I'm not happy with to discuss why I'm not happy with them. That's a very good idea. That's a good way to learn. isn't it? Okay, let me go back to my revolutionary sentence that I just said. I've said things very much like it, but it's never come out quite this clearly before, I don't think, and that is tedium is an inextricable element of craftsmanship. If you will not submit yourself to tedium, you will never be a craftsman. Now let me jump categories really quickly. Again, many of you know, you haven't heard me play, but I describe myself as a fairly serious amateur musician. I describe myself sometimes as a top tier amateur. Okay, so I am no way am I professional where you have to practice. You have to be in tip top shape and you practice, 6-8 hours a day. I know enough about that life. When I was a senior in high school, I literally practiced my trumpet 5 or 6 hours a day. I was a trumpet head. And I wasn't considered that much of an oddity because many of my friends had the same. I hope I won't remember. Yes, Heather says, I hope I won't remember. Was that a Freudian slip? Yes, probably was. Thank you. I hope I won't forget. It's what I meant to say, of course. Anyway, so I was a weird kid in high school. Very thankful for my high school career and me and my fellow musicians. There were a bunch of us. We were not, I wasn't alone. I had a number of friends that we'd take our instruments home every night and practice for hours every night, then come back the next day. My senior year, I took all the study halls I could get in my all the study halls, which is that good? Well, I don't know. I didn't grow up to be too dumb, I don't think, but should I have taken more classes? Maybe. But the fact is, I was a serious musician. And that sentence that I just said, any musician who will not humble themselves to the pain, I'm saying it with different words, any musician that will not humble themselves to the pain of the practice room will never sit on a major stage. And every musician I'm talking to right now goes, that is exactly right. It is not showing off in front of your screwball high school friends, showing your hot licks on the guitar that makes you a great guitarist. It is hours spent in the practice room. Tedium. And the same thing is true with every endeavor of life. If anybody I'm talking to, I'll go to an area I know nothing about. If you're a computer genius, it's because you have submitted yourself to tedium. If you are an extraordinary athlete, I know why you're an extraordinary athlete. First of all, you have some natural gifting. But besides that, you have submitted yourselves to the pain of repeated actions. I have a nephew who is out of the basketball game at the moment. I hope it's a temporary thing because he was one of the premier basketball players in the state of Virginia. 3-point shooter. Jay Barber, if you want to look him up. Was in all the news, recruited by many, many major universities. A truly stellar basketball player. His dad is a very gifted athlete and so forth. So it's no big surprise. But I remember him being 12 years old before he could go to bed at night. And he had some parental encouragement in this regard. Before he could go to bed, he had to go out in the garage and dribble left-handed against the wall for 15 minutes. Now, he'd already been playing basketball all day, so it wasn't like this was the only thing he did. But are you getting the point? I'm sure you are. Any human being who will not submit themselves to the pain and agony of tedium is a human being who will never reach their full potential. Whew. So I started out talking about artists. Now I've just gone crazy, and I'm just painting with a wider and wider brush. And I absolutely believe this is true. So one of the characteristics of modern art and modern artists is that they, in fact, have not, well, at least in evidence, they have not manifested or evidenced that they have submitted themselves to the tedium of craftsmanship. In fact, craftsmanship is sometimes manifestly, sometimes subtly, a dirty word. in... Yeah, architecture, beacon. I believe it. Absolutely. I think every mature human being could say, man, that is exactly right. You can't believe how much tedium I've experienced trying to get good at this and that and thus and so. Now, since I'm on the subject, there are some fields of human endeavor in which you can, in fact, submit yourself to the pain of tediousness, but it will not produce great results because there are too many other people also doing the same tedium, and you all are driving this particular discipline into a place of, I'll mention that. I'll get back to you in a second, Heather. There are some areas, and I've got a very particular arena in mind, and this is especially if by any miracle there are any 14 or 15-year-old boys listening to me right now. Some of you might say, yeah, that's what I am. I'm an expert at video games. I don't want to... You deserve a certain amount of fun and recreation in your life. But if you think because you're good at video games that you're going to grow up and get a job designing, and in your mind that means playing video games for a job, you're bound for disappointment. Now, you're not the only ones. It's not just video games. Again, let me pick on another demographic. If you're an African-American 14-year-old boy living in the inner city and you play basketball and you say, yeah, I'm going to play basketball and I'm going to be the next LeBron James, Seth Curry, you need some vocational counseling. I do want you to achieve extraordinary excellence in your basketball career. But that is probably not going to turn into a money-making career. Why? Because there are just certain careers that do not result in income. Let me use an art one. If here, and most of you won't be able to relate to this at all, but you'll just trust me, I'm telling you the truth. If you are a set designer, that is, you enjoy, maybe you're in high school and you're an artist and you've started designing stage sets for your high school theatrical productions, and you think, oh man, I enjoy this so much. I'm going to grow up and be a set designer. The chances are very, 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 very slim that will happen. The reason is there are too many people working, and this same pertains to video games and basketball. There are too many people working in those areas. First of all, just the numbers, the sheer numbers. 1 out of a million will be able to do that. That's not a scientific number. That's just a wild, to make the point. Only 1 out of a million will be able to make money doing the thing you're doing. And the likelihood that you're good enough to be in that 1 out of a million, is so small. So you have to pick something that lazy people don't pick. And lazy people are people who would rather play games than work hard. And playing basketball, whereas it's a good endeavor, probably will not result in income. And likewise, playing video games probably will not result in income. Okay, Heather asked the question, but what if, Dan, what if you enjoy every aspect of art, no matter how mundane? Then I would say to you, then either one, you're not really being mundane, or you've achieved a very high, mature level of nirvana. I'm being facetious, but you know what I mean. You are, in fact, a very mature person, that you've trained yourself to push through or overlook the mundaneness of the mundane activity. And many people have done that. So, but let me use myself in this particular piece that I'm working on right here as an example. Am I enjoying painting? Right now I'm painting all the roofs of all these houses, right? I've got the first layer. Now I'm going to come back and do the shadows on the roofs. Am I enjoying it? Well, kind of. I'm enjoying it more because I'm talking to you, frankly. That's part of the reason why I talk to you. It's because I want help. But no, this is not a thrill-a-minute kind of stuff. This is mundane. This is tedious. Now, if I weren't talking to you guys, I'd tell you what I would be doing. I'd be listening to one of my history or science or philosophy podcasts. That is what I would be doing. Or literature. I'd be listening to a podcast. Why? Because what I'm doing right now is darn monotonous. And so, yeah, Heather, I think some of us can reach a point of maturity where we actually recognize the value in the mundaneness. But I don't think that eliminates the fact that it is mundane. Again, and you very well may have reached a level of, I called it nirvana a while ago, tongue-in-cheek. I've reached a level of soulish maturity where you actually enjoy the Zen-like meditative state. I feel that when I do calligraphy, I never get tired of calligraphy. Virtually never get tired of calligraphy. I'm doing the letter A, say in copper point, and I'm doing the letter A 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 times in a row. Yeah, it gets pretty monotonous. But I suppose maybe for some reason I really am in a Zen-like, trance-like state when I'm doing that, and so I can bear with it. But the main point, I think the real reality is that anything doing well has a very high degree of monotony, or what's the word I've been using? Sorry, Heather, I almost caught that. To be clear, you're not a what? Has a high degree of monotony. So I get back to my bigger topic of the day, modern art. Modern art is almost religiously passionate against the monotony of craftsmanship. That is one of the key defining characteristics of what most people would call modern art, is the absolute antipathy, there's a good word, is absolute antipathy toward skill. And why? It's because they're trying to convey a message. And part of their message is a scoffing attitude toward the art of the past, the skill of the past. Now, I think I'm speaking the truth. I would love somebody who's a absolute, as I said earlier, a orgasmic lover of modern art to set me straight. But be careful. I am in my mid-60s, and I've been working on this for 40 plus years. So if you come in, I don't want you coming in with a "I thought about this yesterday" kind of attitude, because I won't respect that very highly. I'm just being really honest. You can ask me questions, and I will respect your question. But and I don't believe that I'm right about everything. These are things that I have mulled over, as you can tell, at some length, and still have considerable questions about. But I do think I'm right. I know that I'm right, because this is what the art professors, this is what the, when you read the plaque on the wall of the National Gallery of Art in the Modern Art Building, they will tell you that these artists were against craftsmanship. That's no mystery. I'm not saying anything new there. That is by their own confession. They were against it because they were making statements. And again, I think any artist who's making statements is no longer making art, because art is stuff that's made to look at. And art that is statements is not stuff to look at. It's statements. I don't know how I can say that more clearly. Wow. So I just thought it'd be interesting to get into that subject this very day, because here I am experiencing the tedium of craftsmanship. Oh, I know. One other thing I want to talk about. Now, this broadcast is getting a little bit long, so I won't go too long, but here's one other thing I want to talk about, a related subject. What about computer art? What about digital art? There are many artists doing amazingly beautiful stuff on, here, I'll pull it up here, on what? On a Wacom tablet, like I've got right here. This is medium size, big enough for me. Wacom, W-A-C-O-M. I hesitated buying one of these for years because I didn't know how to pronounce the name. And if you disagree about me, I got my pronunciation from the videos made by the Wacom company. Whoever makes that, I forget, that's not the name of the company. Anyway, so I think it's a Wacom tablet. So what about people who are creating digital art? That is a very good question, and I do have a cautionary tale. One of the chief advantages, and I've created, you can go to my website, go to illustration, go to airbrush illustration, and inside my airbrush illustration folder are some, I tell you clearly, this was produced in Photoshop. One of the advantages of doing digital art instead of real art, physical art. I mean physical art. I don't want to get into the debate of whether it's real. I believe it's real, but one of the benefits of doing digital art instead of physical art, that's what I meant to say, is digital art requires much less tedium. Do you hear me? Now, I'm not saying, therefore, it is not art. I feel like the jury is still out. The battle rages, the debate rages as to perhaps how artistic digital art is. I do believe it's art. And it doesn't eliminate all tedium, right? Anybody who knows Photoshop, good grief, you sit with your butt on your chair for 14 hours straight just to do one illustration. So in that, maybe I've just answered the question. No, there's plenty of tedium. But that is one of the things that is eliminated, because in digital art, you don't have to paint the bushes, so to speak. You just drop in carefully a picture, a photograph of the bushes, and then you tweak it in whatever app you're using. I'm saying Photoshop today. Does that make sense? So, but that is one of the dangers of digital art is it bailing out because you don't like tedium? And if it is, then I would say be very caution there. You may not produce it. Let me use an example. Some of my videos online that have gone most viral are my pen and ink videos. And closely related to that is I have a number of videos that are about airbrush, pen and ink and airbrush. Go back ways, way back to see some of these. But they're some of my most viewed videos. And the response that I've had to many of those videos from young artists is, many young commenters is, blankety, blankety, blank. So already they've given themselves away probably as trolls. Oh, Beacon, that was a beautiful comment. Could I ask you a crazy favor? I don't know if you have to do this when this video is over. That was a great question. Could you retype that in the comment section so I can answer it? And again, I would say this, Beacon just made a comment about some of the modern art, though, that is beautiful. And again, I'll just say this, it's the debate, if you will, about modern art is not black and white. There's a lot of gray area. But there's some area that I feel like, there's some that is beyond the pale, if I can use that classic expression. There's no question these people were against beauty and against craftsmanship and making statements. And the museum is, I'm exaggerating here slightly, but it's full of that kind of stuff. And I don't think it's art. I literally don't think it's art. Thanks, Beacon. Appreciate it, because I'd love to address that in the comment section. Oh, so am I done? Oh, yeah, I know I was going to say, I was saying that in my airbrush, in particular, my airbrush and pen and ink videos, so these go back 5-6 years. So you have to go way back. But they're some of my most viewed. So if you just do a search for Dan Nelson pen and ink or Dan Nelson airbrush, I think you'll find some of these. Anyway, one of the most common comments from young viewers was like, oh man, and again, it would often come with an expletive, cussing and cursing and obscenity, is because they want to make sure I know how strongly they feel. They say, I would never do this, or I'm an artist, I will never, this takes way too much time. You should just do it in digital. You should just do it in Photoshop. You're wasting your time. And every time some young person leaves a comment like that, I feel my own sense of job security goes up. Because a significant part of what makes me a good artist and so many young artists who actually have potential, but they'll never achieve their potential, is because they don't have the patience to push through the tedium, the pain of tedium. I'll put it that way. They don't have the character to push through the pain of tediousness. I use the wrong form of the word just to make the point. And every time they say that, I go, yep, that's why I'm a genius and you're not. Forgive me for sounding arrogant, but you can join me in saying that if you want. All you have to do is be willing to push through the pain of tediousness, and you can join me. Most genius, it's what have you heard? 5% genius and 90% effort, 90% sweat. That is so true in the art world. Who are the best artists in the world? Often, mostly, the ones who worked at it the hardest. Whew. Well, some of you are just really patient to put up. Maybe you're just being. Maybe I'm just entertaining the heck out of you because you think I'm a nut. And no, I'll buy that. I'm a bit of a nut, but I'll go this far. I'm a nut with skill, and a lot of the skill is what you just saw me doing for 30, 40 minutes or whatever it's been, tedium. So I invite you to join me. I invite you to join the ranks of highly skilled artists by pushing through the pain of tediousness. That is the only way to achieve true craftsmanship. And yeah, people without craftsmanship can't do this. I get paid. They don't. Okay. Been fun. I hope it's been fun. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe. And of course, please tell your artsy friends to join me as well. I might do another broadcast today. I don't know. But this was number 318, I believe. I'm getting up there.